Can you tell us a little bit about the beginning of your career and how everything started for you? Take us when you were young and what happens, how you got involved in many things, but how you started us.
Well, Efren, I was really lucky. I've been blessed my entire life. I always through my life would say, who the hell do you think you are? Because I would find myself saying yes or getting involved in something, and I'd think, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do this. But I grew up in a really liberal family. I'm the eldest of 4, and our home was full of opportunity. We were given total freedom to explore. The summers we had a summer cottage, which was really a shack at a lake. I call it the lake, which is really a slough. But my fondest childhood memories were all there. Climbing trees, swimming, sailing, horseback riding, building tree forts, sculpting out of dough because it was raining and Mom was going to make bread. And so we'd sculpt and make funny, weird looking bread pieces. During the school year, we all got music lessons or skating and skiing and all those things. But I always loved the arts. When I say liberal upbringing, we had people from all walks of life, all cultures. In our home, there were poets and musicians and actors and lots of would-bes and artists, and not that that was held in great regard because we didn't have great collections of art, but it was part of what was an important ingredient in lives. As a kid, in our cottage, there was an enormous painting, very funny painting, took up a whole wall, and it was a ski scene, and there were all these crazy characters tumbling down, skis helter-kelter, people going off cliffs and all kinds of things. And it was given to my parents as a wedding gift. And I couldn't understand how somebody would give that big a gift. My parents didn't obviously honor it because it was in the shack, the cottage. But I always loved it. And it wasn't until I got to the art gallery where I work that I found out that it was painted by Peggy Nicol MacLeod, who was a cousin of my dad's. And so, during rainy summer evenings or days, you'd lay and read your book and look up at this painting. So it stayed with me always. In the dentist's office, if I'm nervous, I'll think about that painting. Unfortunately, many years later, the cottage was sold and the painting went with the cottage. But it's just an example of the kinds of things that I experienced. I learned so much from so many special people. My very first art teacher, I would have been 6 or 7, was a wonderful woman, a sculptor, very, very accomplished. Many people might remember her. Her name was Katie Ohi. And when you're teaching, I've taught young people art and to paint, or given them art classes. And she knew I loved to paint, yet she was a sculptor. So she wanted me to use more of my body when I painted, instead of going in with the little details and always trying to make everything perfect. So she would talk about sculpting with your body when you paint. You're sculpting. That way she gave me that feeling right away that something has to have form. Now, how lucky was I? That's pretty phenomenal. And so in school, we had this wonderful, while we were going to school, we had this wonderful upbringing. And you really want to know, don't you, Efren, what makes me tick? That's really the bottom line. I think simply creativity makes me tick. The people that create, the product of creation, the process of creating, and the supporting of creating, and those that create. That's what drives me. That's what has been my passion from the beginning. Not from the beginning, because I'll get there when we talk a little bit more, but because I was pretty young, too young to make those decisions, because at that age I thought I could do it all. I wrote a few notes. My parents were quite extraordinary, too. They were ordinary people. My dad had a job. He had his own little business. And my mom was basically a homemaker. But she was a very creative soul. She'd taken art classes from Lauren Harris, for instance. So she was a pretty creative person in her own right. And a solid musician. My dad was a percussionist and a master sailor on water or ice. My mother and father would talk about when my mom was pregnant with me, and he would tie my mother to the running boards so she didn't flip off. So I got that sailing love and bug before I even entered the planet, before I really arrived. Adding flame to the embers that were happening at home and with this family of mine. On one neighbor on one side of the house for a while was the artist Len Gibbs. Len was fabulous, and he enjoyed the theatrical presentations that we'd stage at home. I really thought, Efren, that I was an artist, an actor, a writer, a poet, a dancer, a singer, a musician. I mean, I was all of those things. But I was also a bossy organizer. So family and my siblings and neighborhood children, we put on performances. And Len would come, and he'd always pay 5 or 10 cents to attend. He'd get some popcorn. And he'd allow me to watch him paint, which was pretty cool. So I learned to watch the process. The other neighbor on the other side was a delightful old lady that we called Old Miller, Mrs. Miller appropriately, but it was Miller all the time. And again, this woman was extraordinary. She painted teacups, but I never saw her paint teacups. But what I did see her do is she built, and she would have been in her 70s at this point. She built scaffolding in her kitchen, painted the ceiling shiny, shiny enamel black, and then painted roses, giant roses, all over her kitchen sink. And I would bring her tea biscuits to keep her going. So there you go, there's another, how lucky was I? I mentioned Katie Ohi as my first teacher. Also, when I was in middle school, I was very involved in drama. And the art classes were pretty crappy. Excuse me, people. But they were. There wasn't, I wasn't fortunate with, nobody in my class was fortunate with the teachers we had that particular time. And so I did more with theater and more with music. And I was really lucky. At the end of grade 9, I was awarded 2 scholarships to the Banff School of Fine Arts. One for theater and one for art. I don't know who the hell I thought I was, but I was obviously very blessed. Unfortunately, I didn't go. Or fortunately, my parents felt that my summers as a kid should still be at the lake, the cottage, the slough. And that if they let me go to Banff for the summer, I would come back a hippie, or actually a beatnik, or worse. So I didn't get to go. But, you know, after a week or so at the cottage, it didn't matter. At the end of my 11th grade, my dad died. And my mom and the 4 of us, Mom and Dad had 4 of us in 4.5 years, so we were all very close. And dreams kind of took a change of direction. And we had to really seriously consider what the priorities were and what we were going to do. And financially things would obviously change, and so on and so forth. Well, my dear sister, one of them, also suffered a terrible accident just before he died. And so that was sort of the first time that all of this reality of the little thin thread that we live with or live on is about, and how you really need to grab and take advantage of every opportunity that comes your way. Really, I wanted to run away, and I made an application to clown school. Who the hell did I think I was? Yikes. Well, frankly, I don't remember whether I ever got accepted or not. But I went back to school, And somehow, within a week, I had taken on the job of editor of the school paper. It was called the Western Mirror. Well, that opened the door to a whole other world that just blew my mind. Wonderful things continued to happen. Because I was editor of the paper, I could go places. I could skip classes, for one thing. That was, huge. But I could go to all kinds of places because I was on paper business. And that's how I met Pierre Trudeau for the first time. And it's a very long story, and I won't bore people with the details, but after meeting him and then trying to crash the convention gala dinner, I decided that I had to show my friends that I was going to do something. So I wrote a note and spoke with one of the guards. And on the note I asked if I could interview him. And the guards, or whoever they are that surround people like Trudeau, told me to wait. And I peered through, and man passed it to another man, and then passed it up, and then I couldn't see what was happening. But I'm waiting, and I'm waiting. And what comes back to me is a message to join Mr. Trudeau for lunch the next day in his hotel suite. Well, who the hell did I think I was? I mean, I'm 17 years of age. What do I know? I was also, a radical socialist. So I would never have voted for Trudeau. Well, that's why I was trying to stake out his convention. But I was also, flattered or scared enough that I went. And there was only one other person there. And that was a student from the University of Calgary who was editor of the paper. Oh my God. Over 2 hours. He asked us questions, we asked questions, we laughed, we compared stories. It was like talking to a family friend. It was amazing. It was just amazing. What's even more amazing is that he remembered me. Again, different circumstances in life. I met him several times again, and he remembered who I was. Now, that's pretty extraordinary that someone would want or be interested in what a 17-year-old had to say. Anyway, I was so lucky. I was so lucky. He was an extraordinary man. And I was definitely blessed. The other part of the thing I did and loved, in grade 12, I was fortunate to have as a teacher, a drama teacher who was an actor himself and a writer, director, Louis B. Hobson. And because I wasn't taking art in high school, I had to do a play, write a play, direct a play, act in it, and present it at the school. So did other people in the 12th grade that were in that class. And I decided that I would like to do a one-act musical. again, who the hell did she think she was? Well, I got 3 other students, talked into it, created a kind of Annie Get Your Gun, and we toured it. It was amazing. To the greatest of shopping malls in Calgary. I think there were 3 of them. So that was, again, who the hell did I think I was? But one little connection or introduction or things happen, and at the end of grade 12, I was offered a kind of junior help reporter assistant something with CBC, but for the Tommy Banks show. Tommy Banks had a television show on CBC. Many people will remember him. He's won all kinds of awards for his music compositions. He's a senator, Canadian senator now, but he had a kind of an interview and music show because he was a great band leader and musician. And with that, I was there for a month, just on a short term. I made a little bit of money, but it was my first sort of real money. And I got to interview the man who, because you do pre-interviews before they're actually interviewed, so that you know what questions are worth asking and which ones you get up with, right? So I got to interview the man who smuggled the Birdman of Alcatraz's book out of Alcatraz. That was mind-blowing. It was all done with phone books, encyclopedias, any big textbooks, because he was into birds, obviously. There were billions of books that went in and out, reference books. And he would pinprick words, word after word, sentence after sentence. And we interviewed this gentleman who had smuggled the book out. And then another one that really was kind of a fun kick was the editor, publisher of the Edmonton Journal, that's the city's newspaper. And he, I found out during the interview, was also editor of the Western Mirror, my high school. So that was kind of fun. It's quite fun. I think what knocked me out again about the creativity of all these things was before one of Tommy's shows, there would be a big meeting because there was a lot of input, you know, there was the music, there was the interviews, there was lighting, costuming, the whole, you can imagine the whole thing. And Tommy would sit at the end of the table with blank sheets of music score paper. And while each person around the table was filling Tommy in on things, and Tommy was asking questions of them, and they're giving information and asking him certain things, he wrote out for each musician, each instrument, the score for each piece. He transposed them all, and he wasn't copying off of anything. The music was all up here, but he was having this meeting, this big meeting. My God, the genius was phenomenal. So each time these things happen, and it's bigger and bigger, and you're seeing the depth and breadth of creativity and the creative spirit. I was so lucky. I'm just so lucky. But, you know, that was a month, and I knew I needed to get an education. I needed to make money. I needed to come up with a career. I had to grow up, you know. And so thus followed post-secondary education. And I studied fine art at University of Calgary. I was going to say UVic, University of Calgary, and did journalism and communications at Camosun College, which is now, not Camosun here. What city am I in? Mount Royal College, which is now Mount Royal University in Calgary. And I had to make money to help pay for these, going to school and all this stuff. So again, I don't know, I guess I love to sell things. I got a part-time student kind of job with the local radio station called CKXL in those days. And also I was a junior reporter for the morning newspaper, the Albertan. And, well, my God, you know, you put yourself out into these things and the people you meet. Well, the Beatles were, at that time, in India. They were meeting Maharishi. They were playing music with Rabbi Shankar. And so I featured Rabbi Shankar. And I knew that he was coming to Canada. And I wrote to him and asked him if, you know, he was on a tour, sort of partly the United States and partly Canada, if he was going to be in Calgary. And could I interview him on CKXL? Well, why does this happen? He said, well, he'd love to. He'd heard about Banff and, you know, and all that kind of thing. So make a long story short, he came. He did the interview. Blew my mind. Who the hell did I think I was, right? So lucky. And while at the Albertan, the newspaper, I got all the kind of crank calls to follow up on. And there was this fellow that called, and he made some of the reporters laugh because they couldn't understand his accent, I guess. That he was a yogi, and so there was all this laughing going on in the newsroom. Yogi Berra or Yogi the bear in the cartoon, you know, who was it? Well, it was the Maharishi Yogi. And nobody knew it then, but they decided to send silly old me. And I got to take a photographer with me. And had the most amazing half day with the Maharishi. And just another remarkable, fortunate experience. I mean, I love horses and I don't really want a horseshoe where it is, but I must have. It makes me cry, quite frankly. Just the joyous meeting of so many of these amazing people and their contributions, and keep happening. I mean, those two people, the musician, Rabbi Shankar, and the yogi, where would we be today without their contributions? My first real job were as a copywriter and what they call photo coordinator at the Bay in Calgary. And I'd write the little ads for how wonderful this summer dress would be to your collection, and hired the models and brought in the photographer to take them. And it was hard. It was really hard. I didn't like it a whole lot. And I was there for 2 years, I think. And I didn't like the artificialness of the advertising. It was hard. So I applied because CFC and television and radio were looking for a promotions person. And I was too naive to know what that meant. But somehow I got that job. And what was interesting there was the promotions I liked doing, but it's all about how many times you say Old Dutch potato chips on the air and how many times you show the package, that kind of thing. But I also got the opportunity to write the first Miss Calgary pageant that was televised. And that was very interesting. And I decorated the float for the parade, the Calgary Stampede Parade, that kind of thing. And then I was fired. Oh, I'm so blessed to be fired. Actually, I was laid off, they say, and 2 30-something guys ran the department. So after I was fired, laid off, didn't know what to do. So I got married. And after a year of eating beans, well, I got other jobs, you know. But after a year of eating beans, because our big wish was to travel. So we backpacked around Europe for about 6 months. And that's why we ate beans, so we could afford to travel. And in those days, there was a book called Europe on $5 a day. I don't think they even can do it for $200 a day today, but in those days, you could, sort of. And while we were there and looking for freebies and trying to stay alive and going through every single gallery possible and standing outside concert halls listening to the concerts. And we met amazing people and were invited into wonderful homes and all kinds of fabulous things happened. But I did a short, in-depth reviewing of my life. And I realized that I wasn't going to be, a great actor, singer, artist, whatever. And so, but that the arts were my passion. Creativity was my passion. And so I decided that henceforth I would do whatever I could in life to support the arts. That's where I knew I'd be happy. And I've never regretted that decision at all. It's brought me so many dear friends, so many phenomenal experiences. I don't know. And I guess that, upon returning from Europe and living in my mother's basement, I got a job in the first week back with the Calgary Philharmonic orchestra, they hired me as promotions and marketing manager. And I stayed with them for just over 5 years. And during that time I took arts management course and certification at the Banff School of Fine Arts. So I did eventually get to the Banff School. But I was very blessed because the general manager of the Philharmonic at that time was an extraordinary cellist, a man by the name of Threadkell, who had immigrated after the war with his brother from Switzerland. And Kurt was also trained as a lawyer, and his brother was trained as, I don't know, an accountant or something. But the only way they could immigrate was to become farmers. And they'd never done anything like that in their lives before. But these two young guys said they would be farmers. So they were given some patches of land to do so. Well, he made a success of his life as a rancher, but also as a cellist, and he played cello for both the Calgary Philharmonic and the Edmonton Philharmonic, and would go back and forth, and he had his little ranch in Red Deer right in the middle. Well, when I met him, he had given up the cello and was now general manager of the Calgary Philharmonic, but he exposed me to music and how to listen to music in that I'd never experienced before. And he would quiz me on what I'd heard. And that's not why I was hired, but that was the kind of rapport we had. So I was very blessed. He was another mentor and one of the great loves of my life. Very, very senior to me, but great love. And I was very lucky. He also, because he was a cowboy and was a rancher, we had that in common. And he taught me never to trust a cow. And he's right. He's right. Yeah. Then my husband, Stephen, my dear, got accepted to the honors program, or the honors degree for law at the University of Wales in Cardiff. And that was pretty exciting. So away we went, sold up everything we owned, and took a suitcase each and a little tiny trunk with things that you felt you couldn't live without. And we went to Cardiff. I, again, was so lucky. I think partly because of my heritage, because we are talking about Wales here. My mother's family were Irish, and they were far preferred to any English. So I think that's really how I got the job. But I became assistant director of drama and dance for the Welsh Arts Council and held that position for 5 years. So there was music, because there's obviously dance, and theatre, and because it's Wales, the music, the history, the language. They're great singers, they're great orators. They're just extraordinary. The Welsh Arts Council is there for the growth and preservation of the Welsh culture. and because it's Celtic, Irish, father's family, French, Celtic, and I'm right in there swinging between the two, I was in heaven. I was just in heaven, and did quite a bit of traveling with the job, and went to the National Eisteddfod every year, which is the great festival of all things Welsh in the arts. And so that included, everything from the carving of love spoons to the music, all kinds of competitions. Just extraordinary. Met wonderful dancers and great actors. It was a huge culture shock, though, when I arrived. You can imagine. And the first week, we went to the rugby game. I'd never been to a rugby game. And they stand up at the beginning to sing the Welsh national anthem. You think you've gone to the biggest cathedral on the planet. And then you watch all these men running around, butting their heads against each other. Now I know why they all have short necks. Wales lost the game that we went to. So I saw another part of the culture, because for a week afterwards, everybody on the street wore black armbands. It was just amazing.
Wow.
But then that's culture too, right? That's the culture. Sadly, for us, because I think we could have lived there forever, but we had obligations at home and we returned. And I was very blessed to be invited back to the Calgary Philharmonic again, but this time as assistant general manager. And I spent an incredible, just over 5 years again there, which culminated in the building of the Calgary Centre for Performing Arts, which now houses, obviously, the Calgary Philharmonic Orchestra, but also 2 theatre companies, Theatre Calgary and Alberta Theatre Projects. Well, to be involved in that extraordinary process of building this incredible mixed arts location and buildings was a phenomenal experience. I was also very lucky that Mario Bernardi was the conductor, and we became very close friends. He's now left us, but he taught me so much about music in another way and interpretation. And I came away from the Calgary Philharmonic because of how intense the experience was with music, not being able to listen to music in the background ever, because it would draw me in. So I couldn't have just anything playing. I don't know how people can work with it. I'm better at it now, but I'm still not there. Because I want to listen, or I want to dance, or I want to sing, but I can't have that. Otherwise it becomes a kind of white noise, but it's not a white noise that calms me, so I want to go there. When we went back to Calgary, we had to start all over again. And we found a little apartment in Lower Mount Royal. And again, the visual arts, came right into my window, because right next door was the artist John Snow. And I went to school with Mr. Snow's son, John. But the great joy was I would pass his studio window going in our door. So every night coming home from work, coming home from the Philharmonic, I got to peer in and see what he'd been up to that day. Just quite amazing. So then, Stephen and I decided to make the big life move change and come to Victoria. I had always wanted to really practice art making, really spend some time, some concentrated time, go to school and find out learn what I could, because I was always working so hard. I couldn't spend I shouldn't say I couldn't. I chose not to spend the time. I put the brushes away years ago, and it was time to pick them up again. And so Stephen took a job with the provincial government, and I went to the Victoria College of Art. And what a privilege. What a privilege to be with the other students, to have met those teachers, to have experienced learning with and from them. I did the postgraduate years with them, and also was registrar of the college for several years, during which time our son arrived. We refer to him as the gift that keeps unwrapping. He's quite a joy. And I also did freelance work for virtuoso trumpet musician Gary Guthman. And then finally, in the year 2000, I got offered the job at the Victoria College of, where am I? I got offered the job at the Art Gallery of Greater Victoria by Pierre Arpin, who was the director at that time. And wow, my dream job had arrived. I was, title was assistant to the director and assistant curator. La-dee-da. I had arrived. Ha. I thrilled to it. I got to do everything from write press releases, to paint galleries, to hang wall labels, and I got a chance, a stab at taking on coordinating the painting. There was talk, well, Pierre's talk, it cost the gallery too much money. And we didn't have the staff, there were so many things, it was just too huge. And I almost begged him to let me try it for 1 year, see if I can make a difference. And lo and behold, I've done it for 14 years. And the painting has really been my passion for 14 years. And there are endless stories. Ones that make you cry, ones that'll make you laugh, ones that'll make you laugh hysterically. And lucky I have been. How lucky I've been. But you still want to know what makes me tick. And there's things that I have written down. Can I share them with you?
Sure.
We all, there's that adage that we are indeed a part of all we see and hear and who we meet. And this is really the crux of the value of creative culture. Art in all of its forms, whether it's music, well, all of its forms, is something of lasting value. And it must be supported. It is who we are in our time. It's who we were in another time. It's what knits us together through the generations. It's what connects us historically. Art is not something of temporary relevance. And I hate to say this, but such as a game, a sporting match, hockey game, football game. Sorry, I don't hate sports at all. But physical education is given a higher priority. I believe in fitness as much as the next person. I believe in all the things you learn in school of teamwork and that you get out of sports. But physical education is given a higher priority in our schools. And the arts have dwindled to practically nothing. That too is another reason why I have so loved my work with the art gallery, because of what they support and what they give to students. Students in the school, students finish school, students contemplating an art career of some kind. They're letting them know it's possible, and they're showing them. But the arts are the first thing that are cut during years of fiscal restraint. And we've watched it year after year, year after year after year. And you never catch up again. It's just gone down, down, down. Never takes a jump. I get concerned that in my down moments, and there are a few, that future generations may look on what's upcoming to us, what seems to be coming, as the second dark ages in art. From the beginning of time, humans have, in times of peace and prosperity, have supported the arts. Look at all the standing monuments, look at all the things that were made with government support around the world. In times of war, they're the first things countries go to and want to hold on to and look after. I'm concerned that they're not going to continue to be valued. And we live in a country that is at peace, that is fiscally balanced. Why are they not made more of a priority? The only way that we can do that is by voting, is by talking to politicians, is by going out there and seeing exactly what is happening. Having the arts as part of our educational priorities for future generations is essential. But we have to ensure that we have the educational resources, all of them, the people, to make it so. We've got to ensure that education in the arts is given equal priority to all the other things that are taught. Not, for years we've been hearing about the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. I know it starts with an A, but it never says, and the arts. In a recent talk by a noted educator, his name is Sir Kenneth Robinson, his belief is that, and I'm going to quote him here, our education system does not value creativity. In fact, he says, it systematically squashes it in favor of training people to do jobs or think a certain way or lower their expectations or yet art is what separates us from the rest of the species on the planet. The arts are the product of creativity and speak of who we really are. We must nurture them, celebrate it, show it, and above all, allow it to happen by supporting it in every way, monetarily, attending in any way anyone can. This business that it is for a select few is ridiculous. We must vote for it. We must be present. We must advocate for it. It's for that reason I have, Efren, been and continue to be so very honored to work along so many extraordinary people here at the Art Gallery. Their contributions are phenomenal, their talents, their education, their experience. People don't know how hard and how well educated and how much they're giving of themselves. And that includes donors. It includes volunteers. My gosh, the volunteer corps here at the gallery is staggering. The money they raise, or the dirty jobs they do. They do some fun things too. It's not all about, you get the drags. But we couldn't survive without the volunteers. The paint-in alone had over 200 volunteers. How do you celebrate them more? Because they obviously believe in what they're doing. These people have all made a commitment to the arts, whether it's with the symphony, the ballet, the opera, the art gallery, theater companies. They're all living proof by what they do that they're important. And on that last note, I want to say a word about the art gallery painting. If there's something that I could point at as being an accomplishment, it would be the painting. 14 years ago, it might have been canceled, but it wasn't. And it has grown to be something that is called a signature event in Victoria by the city. 35,000 people come every year. You've seen those crowds. It's free. Attendees, the people that come, get to meet, if they wish, almost 200 artists. They get to interact with them. They get to ask them about their processes, their techniques. They get to try a lot of the materials. It's a phenomenal experience. I can't believe what those artists have created in that painting. It's they who have created this painting. And it's they who have made the gallery's mandate of making art accessible to all their mandate. And it's the artists. I don't know if they even give it any thought, but they are the ones that make that happen. It's not me. It's not the staff. It's not the volunteers. Volunteers, we all support it. But the artists are the ones that are out there and making the gallery's mandate, which is to make art accessible to all. They're the ones doing it. That is mind-blowing. And then, Efren, they write and say, what a wonderful time, thank you for having me. They send in a donation because they had a great day. How great is that? How great is that? In closing, I'm really, about this conversation about what makes me tick. I want to just say again that creativity does. And I'm so thankful to all my colleagues, the artists that I've met in my life, the artists that are here. Okay, Efren, you wanted a list of some people that were important in my life and how they affected me. So I'm going to read it because I can't remember everybody off by heart. And but I've had such good fortune to work and get to know so many extraordinary people, and in all the arts, be it visual, theatrical, performance-based, whatever, literary. So some of the blessings and highlights are Bill Porteous. Hi, Bill. And he gave me a full set of oil paints in my first year of art school because I couldn't afford them, and he said I needed them. I'd already bought acrylics, but he said, no, you need to paint in oils. So what he taught me is about paying it forward. So I sit on a board called the Victoria Visual Arts Legacy Society, and we raise money to give students in art schools, the 4 art schools here, bursaries to help them through. So it's about paying it forward. Another way to support the arts. Joseph Kyle, who has passed, he was the first person that started, or was the person that started Victoria College of Art many years ago. And he believed in me, and he kicked me when I was going in the wrong direction. Artist Fleming Jorgensen. I'm thankful because he really appreciated any artist's struggle as much as the non-struggle or the end of it. You know, you really do have to, or I've seen it so often in the arts anyway, to have a big breakthrough, you've got to have a struggle first. Jack Wise, a phenomenal man. We spent a lot of time circling the labyrinth and had philosophical discussions that still keep me fired up. Beloved and forever my guru is Jim Gordonier. He was my first year painting teacher. And it just touches my soul. Amazing man. Pat Merton Bates. I met her when I first came to Victoria. And she's generous beyond anything. I'm grateful for her counsel. But she really has, she really lives with the belief that light is love. And that's something I always look for in music now or in art. Where is the light? Where is the light? And it's helped me a lot. Harry Belafonte. I was with the Philharmonic when I met him. We had an accident, and I was running. He was walking, and I came through the doors, and I ran into him. And he's a fairly big man in those days, and I went flying. And anyway, to make a long story short, he picked me up, he dusted me off, and we had a lovely friendship. Mary Bernardi, who I've already said had taught me how to listen. And whose gifts to the music world, you know, are phenomenal. Really taught me about interpretation with music. Well, I think it's the same thing with art. It's the same thing with the written work, interpretation, and there are many ways to see it, and not just stop at the first one or the easy one. Marceau. A famous mime who showed me when I was learning about theater and acting how, without words, just the face, just a few minute little movements to the face and the body, every emotion known to man could come out of it. I've had the fortune to have dear friends who, dramatist, director Gillian Adams, she represents to me the value of the female artist, the pure, different value of the female artist. A woman whose contributions and innovative theater ideas are a voice for women. She's also a staunch advocate of the Welsh culture. And Sean Edwards, a proud Welsh nationalist, a feminist, a writer, an interpreter. Those people at that level of commitment, and I'm just in awe. And I've been so fortunate to get to know them well. Those two women are our son's godmothers. Actor Gareth Armstrong, who spoke always like a Shakespearean actor, and he has toured a one-man show, Shakespearean show, all over the world, but primarily in underdeveloped countries. Most of his career. What do you say about someone who brings that gift? It's just phenomenal. And you asked for my list, so another one is Ralph Klein. Do you remember who Ralph Klein is? Ralph Klein was the news director when I was at CFC and television. He then, years later, became the mayor of Calgary, and then, of course, the premier of Alberta. Well, at the time of the opening of the Calgary Centre for Performing Arts, Ralph came and was being introduced to the maestro and to the concert master and so on and so forth. And I introduced him to Chenik Verba, who was the concert master of the Philharmonic at that time. And this is a big gala night. This is the big epitome night. And in complete seriousness, he asked Chenik what he did for a living. That's why he's on my list. Because even the mayor or premier didn't have the understanding or knowledge about what the arts mean and what artists do. Just, Chenik was smuggled out of Czechoslovakia during the crisis. He came to find freedom and be able to play his instrument, and he found it in Canada. Crazy. I'd also like to say someone else, Robert Amos. And I praise him because he shows and validates the numerous lives within one artist. Because we all have separate selves that are all working in different aspects. You do, I do. He has this amazing never-ending quest for painting the picture through history, through interview and analysis, and by painting. He's just a wind-up toy that just keeps, that ever-ready battery thing, but he's cloned himself in different areas and they all wind up and away they go. But it all comes back together and they come back to him. When I was with CFC on television, I met Carol Taylor, who was Canada AM. There was a television program, I don't know whether it's still going on, Canada AM. She was the first female diva of that ilk in Canada nationally. And she became an MLA and she'd been an arts and culture supporter for many, many years. And I met her 40 years after. And she had given me her telephone number and said, call me if you need me. And she said, you never called me. But I so appreciated that she even remembered she had. Very, very interesting. And John McFarlane, who's very important to our son, because he's his godfather. But he is a world-renowned artist, musician, set and costume designer, in the biggest ballets and operas around the world. And he has shared with me, my son, my husband, the intimacy of his work before anyone ever sees it. The process. To see those drawings of each of those costumes before you ever go to that ballet. To see the set designs on pieces of paper and his oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the name of the scrims that go down and the difference in lighting. Amazing. And then finally, my big thanks is to CFC on television and radio for firing me. And very importantly, I'm honored to know you, Ephraim. You gotta hear me say this. The artists in this community and those that support the arts are all blessed by your friendship and by your commitment, your loyalty, your creativity, and the confidence that you protect, and you're sharing and caring in support of creativity and the artist. As creativity is what makes me tick, Ephraim, it's also what makes you tick. Thank you, Ephraim.
Thank you. Thank you very much.